Thank you. And as you can see, I actually work for Roche. So I joined Roche in February, and I'm really proud to be a rejoiner of a great organization, Genentech and Roche. Thank you for having me here today. This, I promise, is not an infomercial for CEO Works. I'm also going to talk a little bit about talent to value, but not in the same depth that we just heard from Andrea. So what I wanted to share today was an integrated approach that's kind of evolved through my own personal career, which is, as of May 1st, 26 years old, I started working in the talent space as an executive headhunter, always in pharma and biotech. So I have a really deep understanding of working as executive recruiter, talent management, talent acquisition. And what I learned in the past 13 years through great companies like Roche, Genentech, Novartis, is that there's a different way that we can look at our talent management practice. So what I wanted to do was show you the outcome first of this approach, which means it's a combination of looking at our talent strategy from a holistic view and what I call a 360 view of talent. So oftentimes, as we've learned through our conference and in our own practice of talent management, it's quite insular. We're looking at our internal inventory of talent, how do we develop and grow successors, how do we apply certain methodologies like talent to value, but we don't always bring in that external perspective early enough. And as what we're seeing in the market today, in all markets, is that business strategies are moving faster than the way our talent can develop oftentimes. So we do have to take a different perspective when it comes to succession planning for those critical roles, as we've heard. So what I share here with you today is, again, a holistic succession pipeline. When we have identified the roles that deliver value, which we've heard the talent to value methodology, we hear some practices that come out of the Talent Management Institute, but really just understanding what are the positions that are delivering on the business strategy. Starting again with the role identification, and then looking at our talent and ensuring that we have people that are ready now to step into those roles. In the pharmaceutical industry, we don't take a lot of talent risks on certain positions. We can't afford it. If we need somebody to drive our oncology portfolio, that person has to be ready to do that now. They can't develop in the role. So this is where we do have a very strategic approach to ensuring that not only are we developing people at the right time, but we also know who those best leaders are outside of our organization and we get to know them. In the internal insights coupled with the external market intelligence. Why is this important? Because this is what our business does. Our business is not only looking internally at the information that moves the strategy forward, they are constantly orbiting around the external landscape. What are the competitors doing? How is technology driving innovation? What does the portfolio look like? What's the strength of that in the market? So there's so many different aspects that we need to also consider from a talent perspective. And this is where we start to marry this idea of understanding the internal piece, knowing the right roles that deliver the value, knowing our internal talents, but also how do we bring in the perspective outside? And it doesn't always have to be a hire. It could be just, what are other companies doing that's really strategic when it comes to developing their talent, growing their talent, looking at certain modalities when it comes to gene therapy or antibody drug conjugates for our specific area in pharma. How are we measuring that with our internal capabilities and experiences? And then lastly, this is really important again in the scheme of it gets a bit incestuous when we start looking at the same type of talent pools internally and externally. So how do we diversify that leadership by going beyond? And maybe in the commercial space, we're looking at consumer goods. Maybe we're looking at people that know how to do a different go-to-market strategy. So we have to be very open when it comes to, again, how we're developing and bringing in the right talent for our critical roles. Just pause to see if there's any questions, because I think that my time's a little bit shorter. So if there's any questions, just raise your hand while I'm talking to you. It's fine. So here we go. I worked with Hein at CEO Works, and I really had so many great learnings come from the talent to value methodology, but I also had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Mark Efron at the Talent Management Institute and also adopt my own practices when it comes to executive recruiting, scouting, and talent management, and how do we integrate it and bring it together. And so what we've seen through our successful companies is that this perspective of identifying the roles, assessing the talent, but then this early adoption of bringing in our external teams is really where we saw a differentiator when it came to ensuring that we had solid succession planning. So we didn't want to wait. We didn't want to wait till we went through a talent review or a people discussion and say, oh, now we don't have anybody that's ready now. We said, okay, we see that there's some holes in our succession pipelines. We see that our 3-year strategy needs to deliver on X. We don't have the right talent in the right place to do that. So we're going to go outside and start looking at who those people are. And we're going to start socializing those people internally at the same time. So when we had a measure of a strong succession pipeline, it had an internal and an external validated, which meant the business leader went through with their HR partner and had a conversation with the external too. So and it's a very nuanced way of doing this through talent scouting, which you may have heard about talent scouting, and I'll give more detail on that. But it's to ensure that there's this white glove service when it comes to knowing the external market in addition to knowing our internal. And oftentimes we have a lot of data on our internal. We're doing the Hogan assessments. We're doing different types of measures when it comes to knowing people and their development. But externally, the market's dynamic, so we really have to stay in step with that when bringing this forward. And then lastly, review and adjust. So the talent conversations can't be a once-a-year conversation. This has to be probably 2 more times a year where you're saying, what's the strength of that pipeline? Are we ensuring that we have the right people for the right roles? And if there's any changes, how do we adjust quickly to make sure there's no gaps? This isn't going to be new to anybody here, but what I really wanted to point out was our customer base. And so this is, again, where we have learned how to flex to certain models that we've learned, whether it's talent to value or other models, and how do we have, when we have such large organizations that have such differing needs. If you think about the pharmaceutical organization, I'll just give you a perspective. We have commercial, we have international markets, we have research and development, we have pharmaceutical technology, all very different types of talents and needs and timelines when it comes to developing people. So it's really, really essential that as talent ambassadors and advisors, we know that the talents are part of our customer base. We must know them, we want to retain them, we want to develop them, and then we want to help them along their journey. And so there's just some key examples here of how we can do that. But additionally, we do the same thing with the externals. We develop the relationship with these top leaders that we've identified, because it could be a years-long journey before we bring them into the company. But we know that there's only 1 or 2 people in the world that can sit in that seat, and they're one of them. So this is where it's really essential that we have this very tight connection when it comes to working with our HR leaders, but also the business leaders. And we all know the business leaders know who their peers are out in the industry, so we like to tap into their networks. And just a quick, I'm a wordy slide person. Sorry, I'm not the best PowerPoint person, but just just to run through this, the alignment is essential, because if we're not engaging at the right time and we say, hey, we want to have 100% succession planning for certain roles, the accountability has to go back on the business leader and even HR to say we are knowing that talent internally and externally. We're not just taking a name in a box. We actually will do that strategic alignment to know that we have the proper vetting done for pipelining. We can bring forward the talent and do an introduction, but then again, we want to bring the perspective of what does internal look like versus external. If we're looking at a dynamic of developing internal talent, what is the development need for that person? Can they do that while they're in role? Externally, oftentimes we have to hire people that it's going to feel like a lateral move to them, because they have to be ready now to step into that role in organization. So this is where you use data and insights to drive the decision making with the business leader, to say, this is our development opportunity. Do we have the time for that person to develop? Or can we just go outside and hire somebody that could step into the position, which causes its own challenges when you talk about retention and so on. Career architecting is a term that we use at Roche and Genentech when it comes to development. So we really want to understand not only what development opportunities do people need, but of course the moves that they have to make. And so a lot of times what we talk about is how do we reverse engineer? How, if the person's North Star is to be the CEO of the company, how many roles do they need to have to get to that role, to that position, and how many years is that going to take? So that you can start having those thoughtful conversations with the talent to also say, that's one position, here's some alternatives as well. And then of course, retention strategies, if we're not transparent, if we're not having the conversations and asking people what they want to do, and also where we could potentially see them within the organization, we could lose out on key talent. So these are just some of the, different ways that we can retain talent, just through conversation. So prioritizing talent scouting. So for the past 13 years, I've spent in a hybrid role where I've worked in talent management and talent scouting. And that means that myself and my team had a purview on what was happening inside and outside. And again, if you think back to that timeline that I shared, we look very early on to say, when do we need to engage the market? When do we need to bring forward the external insights? When do we start talking to the external talent? To find very senior, nuanced leaders outside of an organization, it could take 3 to 6 months. Even for agencies, the big Shrek agencies, it takes them 3 weeks to put together a portfolio for you to understand what the talent agenda will look like. If you have these early conversations with your internal teams and your seasoned recruiters or scouts, they can already start saying, hey, we know a few people, we're going to target the top companies, we know who's growing in certain therapeutic areas and so on. And that already is starting a dialogue where you start to know how to develop or hire outside of the organization. And these are just some of the metrics that we use to start doing that engagement. If there's not ready now succession, if the incumbent has been in their role a minimum of 3 years, they probably start thinking about they want to make a move. And that, again, varies by function, but most of the time, people are starting to think, what am I going to do next? So if they're at the 3-year mark and you don't have a ready now talent, you have somebody that's what we call one move away, that could be a 3 to 5 year gap in your succession. So we use these very granular metrics to understand how do we ensure that we have something that is solid when it comes to protecting those critical roles within our company that drive the strategy. And then the external market dynamics. This is so important, especially when not especially, in every industry, but in our industry in particular, we have to know how AI is changing research and development. We have to know how we upskill our talent. Are we going to look at a Microsoft or other tech company to help with this? There are so many different things that we have to continually measure from a talent perspective to stay in line with that business strategy. And this is where the value comes in from our business leaders with our teams. We go into those meetings prepared. We say, here's what we're seeing at Merck. Here's what we're seeing at Novo. Here's an acquisition that just happened that will impact our own talent pool. If we have a certain modality that is one of the rarest that's worked on within our pharmaceutical organization and another company starts attacking our talent and taking them, that's something that they want to know. How do we create retention strategies? So this is where, again, your executive recruiters, your strategic sourcers, your talent scouts, they have this market knowledge. You don't have to outsource it to somebody else. They're already talking to the candidates and doing the research. So the result of this is that we have this approach, and again, a lot of words to say, come to the table. I always think of it like cooking. If I don't have everything I need in my pantry, I'm going to have to go to the grocery store, or I'm going to have to be really creative when it comes to maybe swapping out some ingredients to make sure that that recipe works. So that's the integration. This is the meal that you serve is going to be what they'd really want. And you say, this is the products that we use, this is what we needed. Maybe a kind of a stretch of an analogy, but I like to think of it that way because we don't always have everything. Maybe things are expired in the pantry. We don't know, but we need to make sure that we have a holistic, or a 360 view of talent when it comes to, again, protecting the integrity of the roles that are delivering the value within your organization. So the way that you can flex to that is, develop your teams in talent management to learn how to either partner really, really closely with their executive recruiters, or maybe they have that skill set, bring it forward. How do you tap into it? And when I think back to 1999, when I started, I just shared this with my manager, Bridget, last night. When I started doing executive headhunting, there was no LinkedIn usage, and my boss didn't want us to email people. We had to call everybody. And I worked only in research. So I had to call into labs to find people. The reason I shared this story is because imagine the power of data that we have at our fingertips now. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a deep subject matter, headhunter. You can use AI and ChatGPT to find a lot of information to help drive decisions and then identify talent. So just think of ways to optimize your own teams in this integrated approach so that you bring value to the talent management seat. And it's not only internally facing, you actually have informed decision making for your leaders. So again, a lot of words. I'm happy to always connect. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so if you have any questions or anything, I welcome you to reach out. But this is an important way to reframe the way that we work as talent practitioners and how we can continue to just culminate the environment within our talent to value methodology. And that's it for me. Any questions? No questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I really like the identify, assess, map, develop, and review. Out of those 5 things, what did you find was the most important of that aspect? Or are they kind of hand in hand?
For talent?
Yeah.
Or for the roles?
For the roles.
Like what Andrea said, or Andrea, sorry if I'm saying her name wrong, like she said, I think the most important piece is don't get stuck on hierarchy.
Okay.
A lot of times we want to lean towards our LTs, but are they the roles that are delivering the value on your strategy? An example that I could give you in the pharmaceutical industry is in the commercial space, we have people that are launching medicine. And if they're launching medicine in a key market that's going to drive the revenue of our organization, they may be a little bit deeper down when it comes to hierarchy, but they have such an important role to not only getting that medicine to people that need it, but getting the word out. So I think that is so important in identifying versus a lot of times we over-index on, the seniority of a role when that's probably not always the value driver.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes.
Do you have an issue with talent, critical talent being moved in an organization that's leaving a gap in another line of business within the organization? So almost like a war on talent internally that you have to solve for?
I think that could happen, but I believe that if you're having the right conversations within your functional leads, because I have seen that happen where the inventory, when I first was hired at Novartis, the internal inventory was so weak. This is why they had to bring in talent scouting. They were poaching each other, just like you said, and it was leaving significant gaps, especially with the US talent base. So what happened is we did have to augment with external talent. However, you also had to have conversations like, these are critical roles that need to deliver on a certain strategy within the business. So we're not really able to make that talent move yet, but we can talk about what that could look like in 6 to 12 months. I think it happens with every company because there's always like some favorites, right? Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the problem that we have at Roche sometimes is that we have, let's say, a handful of names on multiple
Yeah.
succession. So it's like we've overinvested in these names and we put all of our eggs in one basket. I can think of a woman that we have who's super talented. She's on 18 plants. Well, the reality is she could probably do all 18 jobs. I don't know if she wants to do all of them. And we need to narrow that. I would say no more than 5 succession plans, because then one move and that just puts so many plans at risk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's okay. I thank Erin again, and I sincerely apologize about we had the wrong bio on there, so I read the wrong bio. So Erin K. of Roche, I really appreciate you coming.